You're listening to the Team Check-In, powered by Teamflect. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Team Check-In. And with me today, I have a managing partner at the Arbinger Institute, Mitch Warner. But more importantly, he is a standing advocate. Mitch is the first guest joining the show, not sitting down. So, Mitch, what's going on?
I love it. Thanks for having me on the show. No, I love to stand when I'm in a conversation because I have more energy when I stand. Even when I'm talking on the phone, I stand and often pace because my energy just sinks when I'm sitting in a chair. So thanks for letting me join this way.
Yeah, I get it. So it's not one of those, sitting is the biggest killer in America. You should all get a standing desks kind of thing.
No, but I would advocate for a standing desk. I love mine. It's fantastic. It just breaks things up.
Awesome. All right. I mean, I more often than not, especially when I'm working, since I'm working remote, I find myself like pacing around the house, especially when doing like these meetings. So totally there for you, right? Totally getting that. So, for our guests who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the Arbinger Institute as a whole?
You bet. So as a managing partner at the Arbinger Institute, I get to work with an amazing group of people that are all committed to helping organizations transform their culture. And specifically at the level of mindset. So many organizations try to improve behaviors because they know that better behaviors will lead to better results. But our work has elucidated the fact that mindset drives every behavior, both the behaviors we think to engage in and the influence of those behaviors, and specifically a fundamental shift from what we call an inward to an outward mindset is what unlocks organizational results and what drives excellent cultures. So that's our work. That's what we do.
That's awesome. And you guys are just about to come out with this brand new book, or has the book come out? The Leadership and Self-Deception.
Yeah, the 4th edition was just released in August of 2024, but the book was first published in 2000, and it's been now through 4 editions. It's in over 30 languages and sold over 3 million copies. So it's one of those interesting books in that it sold more copies every year than it had the last, and it just has kind of a life of its own.
Yeah, it's kind of, that reminds me of, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens. The more that the book stays in the market, the more just people keep it and the more just people go for it. That's awesome. So can you briefly go over, the connection between leadership and self-deception?
You bet. Well, look, self-deception is just the issue of lying to ourselves and believing the lie. And that on its face, that seems impossible. How could I be the same person who's telling myself the lie and believing that lie at the same time, if I know it's a lie? But we see this show up all over the place. It's what undermines our relationships. It undermines particularly our leadership effectiveness. If I'm not really tied to the truth, particularly about myself, if I'm not seeing that, if I'm resistant to that truth about me and how I'm showing up and how others are experiencing me, there's no way I can lead. So this book is really to uncover both how self-deception happens and how to identify it and what to do about it, how to live more truthfully in our role as leaders, whether that's at work or at home.
And so what are these lies that, leaders are telling themselves? Like, what are some examples of those?
It's the same lies that anyone tells themselves, and it's usually lies that get in the way of our relationships with others, either that I'm better than you are or I'm worse than you are. And how does that come about? Well, it comes about through a phenomenon we call at Arbinger self-betrayal, which is simply going against my own sense of what other people as people who just matter the way I matter, what they deserve from me. So, let's say you and I work together and I come across a piece of information one day. Something simple. If I'm seeing you as a person, you just matter the way I matter. I'm living in that truth, that reality, then I just have a sense, oh, go share the information. And if I do that, great. But let's say I don't do that. Let's say I betray my own sense about what you deserve from me as a person who matters just the same that I matter.
Hmm.
Well, how might I begin to see you in a way that's not truthful? What lies might I tell about you? Well, you know, you're a threat because there's that promotion coming. Only one of us could get it. And
Hmm.
you're clearly not that hardworking because I wasn't doing anything special to find this information. I was just doing my job. So if I'm doing
Hmm.
my job and you didn't find this information, then clearly you're not doing yours and you're probably incompetent and you may be entitled thinking that people should just feed you information or any number of lies. None of this is true about you.
Yeah.
But I believe that lie about you. And of course, lies about me that are just the opposite. Well, I'm really smart, I'm hardworking, clearly because I found this information. And it might even be that in deciding not to share this information, I'm really kind because I want you to develop as a person. So I'm not going to just spoon feed you information. Look how wise and noble and
You're
kind I
incredible,
was.
Mitch. You're
I'm
you're amazing,
incredible.
right?
So look at this. I've created this lie. I'm incredible. You're not, right? None of this is true. And it happened like that in the moment of
Yeah.
self betrayal. And why? Because I now had this new need arise in my life to be justified. And how do I get
Hmm.
justification? I believe a lie. And look, everything in my life at this point, all of these emotions I'm now feeling, so bugged and frustrated, I have to work with people like you. Those all tell me that this is true. They're not true emotions in the sense that they point me to the truth, even though I authentically feel them. And I'll start looking for all the evidence that this false view of myself and others is true. Well, you just think about that in terms of leadership. If that's
Hmm.
if I'm going around in my life believing those lies, how can I lead others? I just
Yeah.
can't.
And if you look for the evidence on those lies, you might just find them. You might easily find them. You might misinterpret everything you see. Yep, okay, there's the evidence of him being lazy. There's the evidence of me just being amazing at this. And I think one thing a lot of us do sometimes, and I'm understanding that this, what you're talking about, is not coming from a place of bad faith and bad intentions. It's something we can all do unintentionally, right?
Absolutely. Look, the last thing that I will admit to myself is that I am creating this narrative because then
Yeah,
that would dispel the lie, right? The
yeah,
lie has to be believable. So, no, this is just reality. You're just this way. I'm just this way. I didn't construct this narrative, right?
yeah.
And it's even worse than just looking for evidence. It's that I actually will provoke you
Hmm.
to be the problem that I've claimed that you are. So now I'll actually go about my work in a way that doesn't just look for ways that you might be lazy or incompetent or whatever. I'll actually provoke you, right? I'll try to create the conditions by which
Hmm.
you are those things. So it's not just that I have this kind of confirmation bias, it's that I will actively look to undermine my
Yeah.
own success and yours because at least if I can do that, I have even more justification for seeing you that way in the first place.
I have like this is just the more you speak, the more I'm experiencing black and white Vietnam flashbacks. I'm telling you, the more you talk, I'm hearing like Fortunate Son playing in the back and like the choppers going brrr, and just going back and forth. Yep, 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 yep. All of this is so very true. And uh
Absolutely.
so the thing is, another aspect of what you're talking about is I see this more often than not at work, where when we're looking at our responsibilities and everything that we're doing, we see, oh yeah, look at everything I'm getting done. Look at all my accomplishments. Look, oh my God, these tasks. Yep, good for me. But when we're looking at other people, we look at it, well, I mean, this probably took him 15 minutes, and then she did that like 30 minutes, tops, an hour maximum. So where did the rest of the workday go? Unbelievable. Yeah, these.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah, I give myself all sorts of grace and all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
credit because I know my own life, right?
Yeah.
I'm intimately acquainted with my reality, but I just make assumptions about others. And once I've made that assumption, then I have to be justified because
Yeah.
I'm actually at my core, and this is important, at my core, I'm not okay with seeing other people as anything less than people because everyone is a person, right?
Uh-huh.
So I know fundamentally that's the core truth. We are all people. You are as real as me. But if I've chosen not to see you that way for any reason, particularly a self-serving one, right? Then
Hmm.
I'm actually not okay with that. I'm not okay with seeing other people as less than people. So, of course, I have to create a world where that's not just okay. It's the
Hmm.
only reasonable way to act in this situation, right? What I did was not only excusable, it's the only rational approach.
So you are talking about these narratives we are creating and these realities we're building around ourselves, but where does it end? How does one, quote unquote, snap out of it at any point?
It's interesting. Our experience is that the diagnosis of the lie
Hmm.
is the way out. When I see a lie as a lie, I can no longer believe it,
Yeah.
right? So how do I begin to see that the things that I've told myself, the things that I'm invested in, the things I'm actually provoking are not true? Well, I have to become alive again to the people that I'm telling myself lies about. There's there's a sense that I have when I'm betraying myself. I'll just speak from my own experience. Because I've told myself the lie, and so I
Hmm.
know it at a deep level that it is a lie. I actually don't want to spend that much time learning about the reality of another person. Like you gave this hypothetical. Well, that couldn't have taken more than an hour. So
Yeah.
what was that person doing for the rest of their 8-hour day, right? I don't want to find out.
Yeah.
So I won't get curious because then the assumptions go away. So what is the antidote? The antidote for self-deception? It's becoming really, really curious. And it begins
Yeah.
by saying, you know what? Maybe this isn't true. Maybe this is motivated. And so for me, I have to find the red flags that that alert me to the fact that this might not be true. And for me, they're blame,
Hmm.
it's resistance, sometimes it's avoidance. Sometimes I'll exaggerate values. What's important around here is fairness. I wasn't thinking about fairness when I showed up today. I was thinking about how to get the
Hmm.
work done. And now fairness or whatever the value is, that we've adopted as an organization, that becomes
Hmm.
all important. Um, I'll horribilize others. I'll create this caricature of another person in my head. All of those things, and by the way, for me, another one of these red flags is just the feeling of being justified. If I feel justified, I know that there's something I'm trying to justify, which tells me I knew that it wasn't straightforward in the first place. All of those
Hmm.
things are a red flag to go, wait a minute, this might not be the whole truth. And if it's not, what am I unwilling to see that if I did see, maybe would adjust my perception? And then at that point I go, oh, you know what? I got to go get curious. So it's first
Yeah.
uncovering the fact that this might not be true, being willing to confront that, and then
Hmm.
saying, what don't I know that I need to
Hmm.
know?
Exactly. Curiosity is one of the most important values, and it's such an unsung hero of these terms and concepts in the workplace, because we always talk about, oh, lifelong learners, we're this, we're that, but curiosity doesn't come up that often, and it is more often than not the solution to most of the conflicts people will have in the workplace, all these interpersonal relationships, right? It's like that scene from Ted Lasso, that Walt Whitman quote, be curious, not judgmental. That's essentially what it all boils down to. Now, uh, this all these concepts that you talked about, sometimes these awakening moments and like the end of these misconceptions and everything, they can come usually, or performance reviews are seen as these checkpoints where we can undo these mistakes and see everything for what it is, and we say, okay, look, let's look at the past review period in retrospect and see, sometimes they can be opportunities where we uh, discover the lies that we're telling ourselves, so on and so forth. But I have heard that you have some opinions on performance reviews and how we're conducting them traditionally.
Yeah, well,
So,
I do. There's no question that performance reviews, as you said, they are this remarkable opportunity to adjust the
mhm,
perception of reality. And so often they're not. And the reason why they're not is because we're not measuring the right things in performance reviews.
yeah,
If we take a step back,
mhm,
before thinking about a performance review, if you just think about, there's two ways to go about my job. One
mhm,
is with an outward mindset, and one is with an inward mindset. With an inward mindset, as you've already suggested, it's not that I'm malicious. It's not that I wake
mhm,
up going, how can I make everyone's job harder? But I don't see that everything that I do, everything in a
yeah,
job description, every task, every objective that's tied to those tasks is in service of helping someone else,
yeah,
another human being, whether that's my customers, external or internal, whether it's the people that report to me, if I'm a supervisor, my coworkers, or my manager. If you think about it, there is not one thing on a job description, not one objective that someone in an organization has that is not designed or intended to help another human being be more successful. So, given that, if I'm inward, if I'm just thinking, well, I got to get my tasks done, my objectives done, I'm not malicious, but I'm not recognizing that, wait a minute, all of the things that I'm doing impact other people. When I'm
mhm,
outward, it's exactly the opposite. I recognize that, wait, everything that I'm doing in a job impacts human beings, and they matter like I matter. This is where
yeah,
it all comes back, right? They count the way I count. Their objectives matter as much as mine matter. And so if I'm going to do a job in an organization
mhm,
effectively, then I can't start with what I do and my
yeah,
tasks and objectives. I have to start with, well, what are the people that I'm doing any of this for? What are they trying to achieve? Why are they depending on me doing this job? And so as I get curious about their needs and hopes and challenges and objectives and headaches and what they're trying to accomplish, then I start to go, there are things that I could do. No one has to prescribe them for me. No one has
mhm,
to tell me. But I go, well, inside of these objectives, inside of my tasks, what could I do to be more helpful to them, to help them accomplish their objectives? So when it comes to, and by the way, I'll just say this, that's not how most people show up at work. The inward
and
way is the standard way.
and look, playing devil's avocado here, right? Uh, so the outlook you're describing is just the ideal way of going about things, right? And it's not just at work, by the way. It's like the perfect way to approach friendships, family, and everything. But there is a reason why the inward way is, more predominantly found. It's more common, and it's like the default because more often than not, when you look at the world of work right now and everything people are going through, people are in survival mode, right? And everyone is just trying to keep their heads above water right now. Now, the outward look is perfect, but if you're drowning in tasks, if you're not sure about tomorrow, if you're saying, "Oh no, okay, now AI is coming to take my job." Okay, what is the new decision now? How when you're in such confusion and when you are neck deep in tasks, I think it's only natural to, take that inward approach and to just say, okay, these are the things I need to worry about to move my career along. I'm sorry, Bob, like I'm going to shoot you in the leg so the zombies eat you and I move forward.
Look, there's no question that it feels like survival mode, but I promise we're going to get to the performance
Yeah,
management
yeah,
piece
yeah,
of
yeah.
this because it's critically important.
Mhm,
But go back
uh-huh,
with me to that experience, that hypothetical of not sharing the information.
mhm,
When did it feel more like survival?
yeah,
After I betrayed my own sense not to share the information, or before? After. Because now, look, I have to work with people like you, right? Who are gunning for my job or who can't
mhm,
pull their own weight. And now it feels like I'm in survival. You multiply that by all the people I
yeah,
work with. Now it feels like survival. Before, when I just had a sense to share the information, it's like, oh, that takes 2 seconds. Go
yeah,
share that information. We move on. We get better results. And by the way, your experience of me is as someone who's really helpful. My
Mhm.
own, ability to progress and grow in my profession, in this role, in this career, in this company, it's improved by not living in a self-deceived way. But once I've betrayed myself, once I'm living in self-deception, it feels like survival. I can barely keep up around here. And by the way, the more that it feels like survival to me, the more justified I am in not sharing more
Yeah.
information or doing what I might sense to do. So that's the first piece of it. And the second piece of it is that in a workplace setting, we actually are battling a misunderstanding of what it means to have a job in the first place. Yeah, it feels
Yeah.
natural in friendships or maybe partnerships at home or if with children if you have them to feel like, "Oh yeah, well that makes sense." But at work, I hear a version of this statement in every client organization I ever work with. So and so is really good at their job, but they make it really hard for other people around here. And you're like, "Wait a
Okay.
minute." We have fundamentally misunderstood what it means to have a job.
Yeah.
That you could do your work, you could accomplish your tasks, achieve your objectives in a way that makes it harder for other people to achieve their tasks and objectives, and yet you're still doing a good job. We have boiled down the definition of a job as tasks and
Mhm.
objectives. We've fundamentally helped people misunderstand that, hey, working
Yeah.
in this organization means precisely that you're not just getting your stuff done. You're
Yeah.
doing it in a way that's more helpful. And when people understand their work like that, which is a fundamental shift, which changes your culture, all of a sudden they go, huh, why am I doing that? Maybe that's not so helpful. I should do this instead. We just went through this experience. I'll make this real. In a sales team at our organization, our team that works with our clients to help them architect their solution began to think that their job was to have a green dashboard on all of the things that we had told them they should do in order to help a client succeed. And so they got in their mind this idea that I can only be green on my dashboard or I can help my client succeed. And that became a driving justification for doing the things on the dashboard, which I can only do that, but I can't do that and help my client succeed. Do you see the issue here? I can
Yeah,
become
definitely.
even maliciously compliant, and I won't feel that way. I'll feel like, wow, it's so hard to get done what I'm trying to get done. But if
Yeah.
I'm fully outward, I go, hey, why am I doing that thing? I could be doing something differently. If I'm learning about this client and what they need, I'm going, yeah, what I've got on my tasks and responsibility sheet, even my objective, might not be exactly what it needs to be in order to help our clients or help my customers or help my coworkers. So coming all the way back now to performance
Mhm.
management, what does this all mean? It means we're measuring the wrong things.
Yeah.
It means that what gets measured gets done. And so if all we're measuring is tasks and objectives, I can do all of those in an inward way. I can do
Yeah.
all of those in a way that keeps me blind, that keeps me incentivized from seeing the people who I do any of that for. So when we think about performance management, we have to revolutionize that if we're going to help people in the way that we're measuring how they do their job, stay and turn outward. Does that make
I
sense?
think, yeah, yes. And I think I was just about to ask, but where does management come in, right? Where
Yeah.
does leadership
Yeah.
come in? And I think that's exactly where the leadership and the executives come in, the management comes in. Because like the example you gave with the sales team, again, it feels so natural to me to look at your job, especially if you're working in such a like stressful environment as sales, to say, okay, let me just, sometimes you just want to see those green checks, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to get through the week and have those green checks. And again, that's the inward way of thinking. So then the question is, oh, is it like the fault of my sales team because they're all such selfish people. They're
No,
all
it's
just
my
thinking inwardly.
fault.
Yes,
It's
right?
my
That's what.
fault.
Yeah. So, like, how do I like? When did it come to this? When did my people start? What? Why is my workplace fostering this inward thinking instead of facilitating this outward look? Right? And I think changing the criteria for performance reviews and performance management, I think that is one of the essential pieces in that puzzle.
It is absolutely critical. As a leader, you have so much power to transform the culture in an organization, but you have to look at, wait, what are we measuring? What are we incentivizing? What have we told people is their job? If their job is the checklist, just getting
Hmm.
their tasks done and their objectives achieved without understanding what the impact of that is, then I
Hmm.
will fail. So yeah, whose fault is it that my sales team was operating with that assumption? It's my fault. I had set up the way that we were managing performance rather than saying, hey, you know what your primary responsibility is? Your primary responsibility is to help our clients succeed.
Now,
And if there are things that get in the way of that, let's talk. Now, they won't come to you as a
yeah.
leader. They won't tell you those things because nobody believes that. Nobody goes, well, that's great. That's what, Mitch says, or that's what our leader says as in their speech. But ultimately, my job depends on whether all of those check marks are
Yeah.
green. All of my tasks and
Yeah.
activities are done, not whether the client succeeds. So it takes work. And I failed here as a leader to get really curious and say, hey, by the way, tell me about your job. I used to work as a nursing home administrator. And in that role, I had people in throughout a facility that were doing various different jobs, none of which I was actually qualified to do or certified to do. Like I couldn't do them legally. But
Hmm.
I was in charge of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And my mentor told me once, "Hey Mitch, it actually doesn't matter how many hours you spend in that facility in your office.
Hmm.
You won't know what it's like to be a patient in your facility or an employee of your facility until you put on a hospital gown like your patients and you
Hmm.
sleep in one of those beds, literally overnight, and you experience what it is to be a patient in your facility. You will have insight there that you can get in no other way. If you spend a night, just there are things that you aren't certified to do, but I promise you, you can go clean those toilets. And if
Yeah.
you do
Of
that
course.
next to the people that you're leading, you will begin to see things. But we hadn't done that with our sales team. We hadn't spent a night in the bed. We hadn't sat next to people and said, what what are we asking you to do that's getting in the way? And actually reinforce this idea. When you think about performance management, most performance management is structured to measure effort
Hmm.
and capability relative to whether or not we're accomplishing our objectives.
Yeah.
What are we doing to measure our impact? To say, hey, what's our patient's experience like in this healthcare facility? What's our client's experience like when they're helped by a sales team architect a cultural solution? Like that is the missing piece. When you think about how to go from an inward organization to an outward organization, the fundamental difference is we are focused when we're outward on our impact. When I'm inward, I'm focused on other people's impact on me.
Yeah.
When I'm outward, it's all about my impact on others. And our performance management is what I'm doing to reinforce that as a leader, actually taking into account the fundamental issue of a job, my impact.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I think if this was like a live episode, we would have people thinking right now, yeah, that's cool outward, but how do I turn that into KPIs? And how do I so h- and I know that sounds kind of silly, but how do we take, the existing performance criteria we have, like you said, which is more on, performance and getting things done. And how do we turn that criteria into, the criteria that would fit an outward organization?
The KPIs are actually really easy because my KPIs, yes, I have objectives. I need to
Mhm.
deliver X to you on a
Yeah.
particular cadence, or a particular percentage of completion or whatever the case might be. But what about your KPI as the person
Hmm.
who's receiving my work, as the person who depends on that work in order to
Hmm.
succeed? So, what I can't do is say, well, somebody else's performance will dictate your performance, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem fair. But when the people in my organization that report to me, when they come and report to me, I just had one yesterday morning, that person felt responsible for holding the performance management review, not me, right? because he's the employee, and he knew that his responsibility was to do his work to achieve his objectives in a way that enabled others to achieve their objectives. So when we sat down, he simply gave me his performance management review. He had done all the work to say, here's my objectives, here's whether they're on or off target, and if they're off target, here's how much they're off target, and here's my plan to rectify that. And all of that is in the context of, here are the people that I impact in my work. Yes, Mitch, you're my manager, but I've got customers, and I've got my coworkers, and I've got my direct reports. In advance of meeting with you to talk about my performance, I've met with those people, and here's what they're saying. I myself, as the employee, have done the check-ins with the people that are on my job map, the people that I impact in the way I do my work, and here's what they're saying. And then it's on me to go, hey, you know what? I'm seeing the same thing. Or actually, I've had a conversation with so-and-so and so-and-so. It feels like there might be a disconnect. And maybe they're not comfortable telling you what they're seeing, but what I've heard is that the way that you're doing your job over here is making it difficult. Would you go have another conversation? Or sometimes it's, you know what? Could you have a conversation with this person? Because it's clear that you haven't connected with them. They've got some feedback for you. Notice that there's a couple things going on here. First of all, as the manager, it's not my job to hold people accountable for their impact or their performance. It's their job. And number two, when I'm doing this right, they understand that their impact is their performance. They're not two separate things. So I can't be performing in my role in the way that's needed by the organization if we're going to be outward, if I don't know what my impact is, or if that impact is deficient in some way. And so it's on me to figure that out. It changes your work as a manager. It puts the responsibility and the opportunity to grow in the hands of the people who are doing the very work.
Yeah, and so much of that depends on having this relationship of trust enough to, give feedback openly and not just, feedback coming from the top down, but sometimes, feedback from bottom up. And I think one of the things you mentioned early on about, the nursing home administration story is, like we said, helping the customers or helping the custom so being helpful towards the customers versus getting all those tasks done, and sometimes those tasks getting in the way of helping your customers. Now when you look at the employee who's choosing the tasks over being helpful, we can see that okay, the boss is saying this, but I have to get these done, because if I don't get these done, then I'll get chewed out for it. And yeah, there is so these two outlooks, they don't match, and there is some criticism to be made. You, in an ideal world, you should be able to say, hey Mitch, you're telling me to be focused on this, but you're also chewing me out on these tasks, so we got to make a decision, and what you're doing is wrong. But if you don't have that positive relationship of trust between the manager and the employee more often than not will be intimidated to saying, yeah, I can't do these tasks. They're getting in the way of these. And employees more often than not feel the need to say, I'll find a way, I'll get them done. I'll
Yes.
figure something out. So I think so much of what you're talking about depends very heavily on building this trust between managers and employees, so that employees feel comfortable saying no and giving feedback openly to their managers. So how do we facilitate that relationship?
This is why we spent so much time talking about self-deception. As a
Yeah.
leader, if I'm not seeing the truth or willing to see the truth,
Yeah.
even if I'm blind today to the truth, then there's nothing I can do. Anything that I do will just be a behavior. And behaviors don't work if I don't have the right mindset. So first I have to be open to it. And then I've got to model whatever level of accountability I want in my team
Hmm.
members for their impact, whatever curiosity I want to see in my team members around how they're impacting others. I have to model that. And not at just a behavioral level, at a mindset level. I have to say to those same employees, hey, you know what? I'd like to meet with you because I'm seeing that I'm not having the best impact on you. And I want to
Hmm.
take full accountability for that. I think my impact has been X, Y, and Z because it seems like what you're trying to do is accomplish this. Is that true?
Hmm.
And they say, actually, yeah, that is true. Or no, it's a little different. Well, it seems like that the ways that I've been making things harder for you is this and this and this. And I got to own that. I am so sorry. But I'm seeing that now. Is that true? Is that the ways that I've been making it harder? Are they different? Are there more? Tell me more.
Hmm.
And then given all that, here's something I feel like I could do, changes I could make as your leader. I'm reporting, if you think about an org chart, if the managers aren't reporting down in a highly accountable way that
Yeah.
is curious about their impact, that takes responsibility for their impact, why would they ever expect an employee to report up, so to speak, in the same way? I have to model that first. And we call that a meet to give. When I see my
Hmm.
impact, I have to do the thinking in advance to go, what are their needs? What are their challenges? What are their objectives as a person? What is life like for them, particularly having to live and work with me? And
Hmm.
then I've got to take ownership for that and find ways I could make things better. If I just meet with those that I lead and go, hey, tell me as your leader, what could I do to be different, to be more helpful? Don't expect anything. It'll be crickets. No one feels safe to share. But when you've done the work to say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I think that this is what you're trying to achieve. Tell me more. Here's how I'm getting in your way. Tell me more. Here's things I think I could do to be better for you. Tell me more. Now the floodgates open because you've demonstrated that you've been thinking about them, you care about them, that
Hmm.
you want to take responsibility. Now it's not just a matter of being curious. It's modeling the very accountability that allows other people to share with you what they need to share with you that you have to know as a leader.
I love that term reporting down, even though like the ideas of like up and down, sure it's a little hierarchical, but still the idea of, managers reporting down is such a beautiful thought. And when applied correctly, like you said, it can lead to that whole trust and it will benefit all parties involved 100%. But again, it all comes down to, and the more we talk, the more I'm loving the whole self-deception narrative, to be honest. But it all comes down to like before, the example of the dialogue you gave, in order for like a leader to be initiating that, in order for a leader to say, hey, I'm not seeing this, this is the impact I think I'm having. In order to have those conversations, first the leader has to, diagnose the self-deception. And until that happens, that dialogue isn't happening, and it's sure that that diagnosis is not coming from someone working under that leader. They'll never, like, that is such an intimidating prospect. So what are some early warning signs that leaders can identify, saying, yes, okay, there is a disconnect between me and my employees, or there is a disconnect between so and so managers and these employees and their team?
Great question. Look, the performance of my team is an indicator.
Hmm.
Just are people actually performing at their best? If they're not, why aren't they? Because I know that people love to perform more than they love to not
Hmm.
perform. So why are they
Yeah.
not performing? That's an indicator, right? Is it fun? Work should be fun. Actually achieving cool results together, and it doesn't matter what your work is, but
Hmm.
doing things together that you couldn't do separately, that should be fun. And then, if people aren't telling you, if people aren't giving you feedback, I promise you it's not because you're perfect. It's because people don't feel safe. So
Hmm.
how would you create that safety? And sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I need to take accountability, but I really need to know. Like I want you to know that I want to see what I'm not seeing. If,
Hmm.
going back to what you said before, if at a behavioral level I chew people out, then
Hmm.
of course no one's going to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
So Are there behaviors that are more or less helpful? Yes. But the truth is, even if I don't choose people out, even if someone is listening to this and going, oh, you know what? That's my problem. I chew people out. I'm not going to
Hmm.
chew people out anymore. It won't make any difference because
Yeah.
what people are responding is not just a change in your behavior. They're responding to how you see them, and you can't hide that. That's the
Yeah.
hardest part of leadership is that I can't hide how I see people. It will come through in everything that I do. If I'm blaming my team, they're the reason why we're not succeeding. These idiots that I have that I should probably replace. It doesn't matter how I behave. It doesn't matter what I say. That blame will come through. And
Yeah.
so I have to look for, these red flags as we've been talking about. How would I know? I have to look for the places where I'm actually feeling blame, the
Hmm.
places where I'm feeling justified, the places I'm feeling resistant. Are there people on my team that I avoid?
Yeah.
Hmm. How are there people on my team that I know more about as a person? Just who they are, their challenges, what their home life is like, what their goals and aspirations are, even outside of work, more than others? What might that tell me?
Yeah.
You know, just
Yeah.
asking myself those questions. But I would say if you find yourself in a place where you go, I've resisted that person, or I'm avoiding that person, or I'm just bugged by that person, spending time preparing to meet to give and then having the courage to go and meet to give will transform that relationship. At least it can.
Yeah, Mitch, I'm sorry to tell you that no one ever in the history of work has ever been bothered by or avoided anyone. Just,
Well, it's so funny because we talk about, performance and, market conditions and all this stuff. We got to get a better strategy. And the
yeah.
reality is, you get this stuff right,
Uh-huh.
you know,
The
it,
rest
it's
will
it
follow.
the rest follows. The rest follows.
I get it. And yeah, it's all about asking at the end of the day. Again, it's lovely how everything comes down to curiosity, but it's all about asking the right questions because I think when you said, when we're talking about these warning signs and performance was a very easy thing, right? Performance just rolls off the tongue. Yeah, performance is the early warning sign. But when most of us and when most managers or leaders see, low performance, they don't immediately think, oh, there's a disconnect here. Oh, it's like a self-deception issue. Oh, it's like a problem with the relationships in this workplace. Immediately it goes back to, oh, it's probably these tasks that are not done. Oh, it's probably like the attitude of this person.
Mhm.
Instead of looking at, the disconnect between the managers and employees. So even though when you said, performance is like a clear warning sign in this issue, it's not what most of us think, right? When we see low performance, this is not what we initially think about.
No. And the reality is, if I don't understand that performance is performance with impact, right? It's not just getting my tasks and responsibilities done,
Yeah.
it's having the right impact on others, then I can say, oh, well, performance is great. And yet something feels off. One of one of the people that I admire the most, and he's told us, tell my story. His name's Warren, and he works in one of our clients. He is nearing the end of his career, and he has been one of the top performers at what is a multi billion-dollar organization. So as a top performer there, at the end of his career, he was considered he was considered one of the best. The problem was everyone in the organization knew that it was terrible to work with Warren. They hadn't yet made this shift into finding a job. And this person had lived his entire career as a high performer, and yet he was so challenging in the workplace, you would call him toxic.
Yeah.
And finally, the CEO had the courage to sit down and the perspective to say, hey, by the way, Warren, you are operating at a 72%. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he said, because you're achieving your objectives probably better than anyone else in the company, but at a massive cost. So
Yeah.
massive that I don't know that we can keep you. And it was such a revelation to Warren to realize, oh my word, You're saying that my job is to accomplish my objectives in a way that makes it easier for others to accomplish their objectives? That's what you mean is performance? You know, he had never been shown that before. And it fundamentally changed him. And when I say him, I don't mean just him at work. I mean his life. Because we're one person. Who we
Yeah.
are, there's no different. We're not a different person at home versus at work. We're either outward or we're inward. We're either focused on our impact or we're not. And so, yeah, when I say performance is suffering, what we're really saying is culture is suffering. Not just
Yeah.
that we're achieving our result on paper, we're
Hmm.
achieving our result in a way that makes it easy for everybody else. You know, it has this tide effect where all of us are improving. It's fun. We're finding innovative ways to adjust what we're doing because we're all focused on impact. That's what I mean by performance.
I love that. This is also known as the Dwight Schrute paradox. But
I love it.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it better. And I loved how you touched upon this isn't just about your work life because I hate the discussion around the term work-life balance, right? I mean, and people take this idea the wrong way. And when you say, work-life balance, we have one life, right? We all have one life, and we choose to devote some of it to work, and we choose to devote some of it to other ventures. But, and sure, some people take this notion saying, work should be your life, and they take it in an entirely different direction. But how we approach things at work, more often than not, uh, are also the way we approach things outside of work as well, right? Am I just focusing on the things I need to do versus the impact I'm having on other people? And the example you gave with Warren, just that conversation, that is a very tough conversation for a manager to have with such a high performing employee, because I imagine you still don't want to lose this employee, and you still don't want, because at the end of the day, Warren is performing at a high level, and you don't want him to, uh, you know, feel offended or burnt out, saying, "Oh, I am working hard, and I'm still, my boss is using this 70% thing on me now." It can backfire very much, right? So you want to have that conversation without actually losing the efficiency of that employee. God, that was the worst segue I've ever done. It took me
No, no,
so
no, no,
long
no.
to wrap that
What you're saying
sentence.
is
Oh my God.
so important. That's the reason why managers don't have the conversation, is because they go,
Yeah,
well, this person is quote unquote performing. And
yeah,
the fact is that even conceiving of the problem that way is the
mm-hmm,
problem, right? This person is delivering on objectives. They are
mm-hmm,
completing all their tasks, but the wake of
yeah,
problems that they leave behind them, the challenge it is to work with this person. And look, I have seen this conversation many times in our client organizations where somebody finally realizes that, wait a minute, as a manager, I've been failing because I've let my Warrens, my quote unquote high performers, think they're high performers, and I've
mm-hmm,
incentivized them to keep performing in a way that doesn't take into account their impact. What a disservice to that person. And so I sit down and I say, hey, you know what? What you're delivering in your role is remarkable. Thank you. We couldn't succeed without what you're achieving, but
mm-hmm,
what you're achieving is actually coming at too high a cost for the organization,
yeah,
because you're not seeing that the people that you're doing any of that for are people. And by the way, they're not feeling seen.
yeah,
Now, if I go into that conversation with Warren and I'm bugged and I'm frustrated, he'll respond to that, not to what I'm
yeah,
saying. So I have to see him and recognize that I've created this. I have let him perform, quote unquote, without understanding that his role is to do that in a way that has the best impact on everyone around him. That's on me. So I have to go in and I have to say, I have to take ownership for this. I have in the way that we've talked about your performance in the past, and the way I've even incentivized you, and the way we've held performance management conversations, I haven't helped you see that your impact on others is just as important as the output, right? It's impact and output. And in order for you to work here, we have to change that. I need you to fundamentally shift the way you've been thinking. And look, if I'm not prepared to not have Warren work here anymore, then I probably can't have that conversation. I have to recognize that, yeah, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if I'm not willing to have the right culture, then I probably can't have that conversation. And I will indulge, and I use that word very explicitly, I will indulge the Warrens on my team, the quote unquote high performers that make it harder for everyone else to work here. But if I actually want to lead, if I want to lead people, I have to fundamentally help people reconceive what it means to have a job in this organization. To be outward means that you're going to accomplish your objectives in a way that makes it easier for others. And you are going to hold yourself accountable for that. I don't hold you accountable. This transformation, what we're talking about, this fundamental reconceiving of what it means to have a job and how we work together, that's what we do. And we see it all the time. You can transform radically an organization if you help people fundamentally rethink what it means to have a job. And in everything that you do, in the performance conversations, in the sidebar conversations, you're focused on this. You're leading. You're actually finally leading.
Mitch, I can't think of a stronger and a better note to wrap this up. I mean, we're fast approaching an hour, and honestly, the hour from my end, it just flew by. You are an absolute force of nature. And if there's one thing I've learned from this episode is I am never sitting again. That's
I love it. Well, it's been fun to talk about because it has real meaning. You know, as you said, this idea of work-life balance. People, you know, I think about my own life, the amount of hours I spend at work. This is a critical part of my life, and we should get this part right. I mean, from a human perspective.
Exactly. Exactly. And that was the point I was trying to ramp up to before I just rambled off into the distance. It is, I mean, work and life are not separate. It is a key and critical part of our life. And there are some leaders who are using this as an excuse to incredibly overwork people. And they're saying, oh, you know, look, it is a huge part of your life, so why don't just devote yourself fully to it? No, I think that outlook should be used to enhance the employee experience, saying, no, this is a critical part of these people's lives, and it should be as positive and as impactful as possible. So, Mitch, before we wrap things up, how can our listeners reach you, and anything new and awesome that they should know about?
You know, we'd love to have you come to the website, explore what we do, and then there's an opportunity there to engage in a conversation. Just engage in the conversation. We'll reach out to you and find out what's going on. What do you want to solve? What are you trying to tackle inside of your organization? If you want to explore the ideas more deeply we've been talking about, go to Amazon or wherever you buy books, Leadership and Self-Deception or The Outward Mindset. Both two bestsellers that we have out in the market are a great place to start to explore what this could look like for you, what it could transform in your organization and ability to get results.
Perfect. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts, leave us a like, subscribe. It really helps the show out. And if you are looking for a performance management or a performance review software that you can integrate fully into Microsoft Teams and Outlook, you can always check out Teamflect. The link is in the description. This has been the Team Check-In. Mitch, thanks so much for coming on the show. Have a great day.
Great to be here. Thanks.
All right.